Welcome to another episode of Design Lab. This is your workshop series to provide a Gladstone community with ongoing training of a wide range of design and illustration needs. We are your hosts. My name is Giovanni Mackey. I'm the creative director here at the communications department at Gladstone.
And I'm Tammy Tulpa, and I'm the scientific illustrator at Gladstone.
And
happy to be here.
Yes.
Should have said that earlier.
Oh, yeah. Always happy to be here. What do we got going on today, Tammy?
Posters.
And I thought...
Oh, go ahead.
No, I thought we were going to get out of PowerPoint, but
nope.
But actually we are going to continue with PowerPoint. We are going to also show you how to work with posters in PowerPoint, as it turns out.
Yeah, and Illustrator. And I was just going to say, I wanted to sort of get a read on what folks were using. Are people using PowerPoint? People using Illustrator? I know there's a couple people on at this moment, but if you're willing to share in the chat what you use for posters, we have templates for both of those applications. And in my experience, people are using PowerPoint, and then some people are using Illustrator. And
just because there's just so much more comfortable in PowerPoint. We recognize that. We try to help people out, and also leave it in the comments. And we're posting this to YouTube, so don't be shy to post this in the comments, whoever you are. Yeah, we're interested in finding out what the proportion is and what the popularity is.
Okay, used PowerPoint until now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not surprising.
Yeah, and we'll talk about sort of like the benefits and drawbacks of each as we kind of do our demos. A lot of people are using PowerPoint. I don't know if people can make a poster in BioRender, but I think you might be able to.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Or Canva.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about poster creation is that you're basically creating a text layout. I mean, these are very text heavy, and I think what we always argue is that Illustrator is a much better product for laying out copy. It's not the best for laying out copy, right, but it is certainly a vast improvement over PowerPoint. PowerPoint, which is sort of a graphical application, is not necessarily suited for print, which is also its major downfall. And its type capabilities are extremely limited, or quite a bit more limited than Illustrator. But so that's why we always kind of want to push people towards that, or let them know about what the opportunities are there and show them, what's really possible. So I guess with that, let's dive in and take a look. And take a look at what. So I think when you and I were talking about this, Tammy, we were thinking about like, what's the best way to sort of approach this? And I think, I think part of that is thinking about what are all the mistakes that we so frequently see with folks when they do create posters. And I think the best way to show that is to actually look at an example. So we found a bad example, and in order to sort of protect the innocent, we really glyphed out all of the as much copy as made sense to keep it anonymous. But in all fairness, this was actually on a Gladstone template that actually was provided up until several years ago,
and not the worst, not the worst at all.
Yeah, it's not the worst. But I know this has a feature that you don't like, Tammy. I sort of share your qualms with it too, which is the colored backdrop and the white text boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Very common, when you say feature in poster templates or poster creation. Yeah, I don't know what that's all about. Do you?
I think it's a bit dated. I think it's nice to have those containers around sort of your sections, but I would want to see maybe less contrast if I were to do it at all, because the floating aspect to them, and also our eyes are drawn to value, right, light or dark, and so
Yeah.
having those dark kind of gutters, I just find a little visually distracting. But you see it a lot, and I think it was kind of all the rage in posters a bit ago. So there are a lot that have that.
Yeah, and I think you and I are as you and I know, the one of the principles of good design is really sort of reducing down to the least amount of ink on the page, so that way you can
Mm-hmm.
concentrate on the most important kind of elements. And it just seems like it's more for not necessarily more of a benefit. I think there's more concentration being put on these sort of bounding boxes than proper formatting of things,
Mm-hmm.
so that way those are sort of less distracting.
And those boxes also highlight some misalignments, right? Like I see some
Yeah,
in bullets and stuff, and having those around there makes that a lot more evident.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that, like I'm saying, sort of it's almost like you're thinking like, oh, it's in this box, so you can sort of forgive the other things, but I don't know, it tends to highlight those. There's a couple of things here too that I like, and a couple of interesting things, like some inconsistencies here. And I don't know if it was the user who did this, but this is true to form for how, even though we glyphed out the copy, this is how it was laid out. There's an object created for this background um, fill, but then there's a text box inlaid in here.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case on this object, which
Mm.
yeah, is actually text box with a fill on it that's applied. So obviously inconsistencies across there. Who knows what that was a result of, copying and pasting or whatnot.
Probably
Um,
being in a hurry, right? Because you got to
right.
get it out.
Oh yeah, you're just churning and burning, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Also other things like and this might have been, part of the template, who knows, but like the title of the boxes, first of all, they're center aligned. The rest of the copy is sort of a mix. We've got this left aligned copy, thank goodness, because they're bullets. You cannot
Phew.
and
Yeah.
should never attempt to center align bullets. But the titles of each section are center aligned, and then you have the body copy, which is left aligned. Actually, it's beyond that. It's actually left justified.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, but maybe let's hold on to that for just a second, because that is something that we definitely want to come back to. But the other thing I was going to point out, the difference between these section titles and then
Right.
these titles, right?
Yeah.
That's off, right?
Yeah. That's the reverse of what we would want. We would want the section title to be larger for that hierarchy. So we would want those. So you go either way, right? You can make the section titles bigger, or these figure titles, I guess is what those are, smaller. But
Yeah.
as it is now, it's a little confusing to me. Like what do I look at first? I don't look at results first, because it's centered, but also because that other text is bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And the hierarchy is always a key, right? And making sure that that there's consistency with all your typography. You want all your body copied the same. You want all of your titles and all your subtitles, and you sort of have your, what you might also call like header size. So a header 1, header 2, header 3, and they're sort of diminishing and levels of emphaticness or dominance. Obviously your title of the poster is going to be the most, and everything kind of um, like goes down the rungs from there.
Mm-hmm. I know we said
Um,
we weren't going to talk about figures, but
yeah,
I'm here just to point out that, like, I wouldn't do the red and green on that second figure.
yeah,
It's always something to avoid, red and green, in a figure, especially if you're trying to convey meaning. It's just a bad practice. And then for
right.
contrast, that green with white text, I mean, maybe at poster scale that would be okay, but in general, I can tell that that's not enough contrast. And so best practice just to, confirm that you have adequate contrast between colors in your figures. But
Yeah,
maybe that's another session, right?
yeah. A lot could be said about the figures, the illustrations, as well as the graphs, and making a more cohesive color story, making sure that they all sort of agree, all that kind of stuff. We can kind of go down that road. But I think also let's note questionable sources as to whether or not we have these are just sort of taken from the internet and appropriated, and how we're going to use this. These are often for educational purposes, and so oftentimes people feel like they have they're really sort of within, what is that, not public domain, but
fair use.
Fair use, thank you. Which you should always be cognizant of. Does it fall within the sort of a fair use category? Would you say this does, if it was for educational purposes?
So the way I learned it was that fair use applied if you were using a figure or illustration for in-person teaching.
Right.
But I don't know if that's morphed or changed over time, so I can't claim to have my finger on that pulse, but that's what I learned. So yeah, so in-person sort of educational purposes, fair use would apply.
Right.
Because I've had tons of my work stolen and, used in nefarious, ways that weren't legal, but then also in fair use ways too. So it's kind of always happening.
I would say it's always a great rule of thumb if you are using it for purely didactic and educational purposes, and you're affiliated with an EDU and you're using that, it's always great to attribute. You never know where this is going to end up and where somebody's going to decide to appropriate it from. And so an attribution of where you got your figures is always a best way to go. And even better than that is to use things that you clearly have the right to use.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, there's lots more to talk about on that subject, but just kind of moving on. There's a couple of things I wanted to point out. One was that I like the fact that there is a sort of dynamic layout happening, and it's not strictly 4 columns all equal size. There is a sort of hierarchy here to help you sort of move around the page. A generous amount established and sitting on a grid or on the layout for the results, and then these sort of sections here below, but they do feel a little bit messy. They're all, it seems all a little bit random or haphazard. These 2 sections below, this column, although this column is lined up and this column is lined up, they are oddly slightly different sizes for no particular reason, I think. So that sort of stuff, I definitely think we can clean up, or I would, or we have a solution for, or we have a tool that can help with that. And I think that's
fine.
Yeah. So, anything else to point out?
I see little inconsistencies in that light blue, grayish blue, gutter or gap between those panels.
Yeah.
They're not, some are wider and narrower.
Right.
And all of these things these aren't like showstoppers, but if you learning how to sort of rein all that in and make it really professional, that really will elevate your poster and then elevate your presentation. Right. All of those things, even if they're little and invisible, they really do help to communicate if you do them well. Yeah. So that's our hope for you today.
That's a great point, and that's a great I think good design overall is sort of invisible, and so what we're trying to help out to do is to make the design and the design elements like such a feel natural, and also it kind of drop into the background and let the content really push to the forefront. So really, if you are noticing the design more than the content, then that's sort of a red flag overall, I think. So with that, there's I'm going to jump over to a template that we have actually built, and we have you and I, Tammy, have been helping or working on in the run up to this and up to the very last minutes, updating these templates. And I think we're going to have these posted within the next day or two to our intranet. Hello. And so you guys can download these and start using them. We have updated the underlying grid. I'll get into what that is and how you're going to use it. And we have them both in PowerPoint and Illustrator.
And you're an Illustrator right now. Just wanted to confirm that.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm an Illustrator. And here's what I did is I actually just copied and pasted this in. And it was really that easy. And that's what I've shown this before. But the great thing about PowerPoint is that it is a vector application, or it carries vector information, and you can just copy that out and paste it directly in Illustrator. So you can sort of, if you've got an old poster and you're rolling it over, you're ready to start adopting, Illustrator things. It really is. It's not so hard to just start to jump in and move some content over. What it does do is it does like end up artifacting a bunch of text. And so this does require, in some cases, not all cases, some cleanup. This can be a real pain. But I think actually, and we showed some great plugins that can help with this. But really, I think actually, let's try this out. I think that I can just copy some of that content, even though it's fragmented in there. It should transfer over. Oh, I lost some breaks in some words, but it's not as bad as it could be. So so I have to reinsert some of these breaks in some of these words. But right off the bat, you can see what's great in Illustrator is that I can see actually all these hidden characters. So you might notice all these blue characters that are showing up, these dots in between words, and at the end of any line, I can see this is indicating that is in fact the end of all the copy in that text box. Those are super handy, and there's tons of different little glyphs that indicate different things, but they are a very visible way, and I can expose those or hide those, type. Gosh, all these things that I actually know it's.
Oh yeah, there it is. Show hidden characters.
Yes. It is, yeah, exactly. And you can see the key command here, which I know from muscle memory, which is Command Option I.
I for invisible, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so people are probably doing that in Word already, where you can show and hide those easily in Word. Hopefully. So people might be used to that.
Yeah, but not a capability in PowerPoint, which is really frustrating because that'd be fantastic. Yeah, so but I pasted that guy in. Let me go back actually, no, I like this as an example. I pasted it in and it pasted and it remembered the style that it had before. But I don't really want that. Well, luckily, I can just kind of lazily paste in here. What I could have done is I actually could have selected these. I can't select it with the text editor because that will just allow me to select the one. I have to use the direct select tool. So I'm holding down Command to get my direct select tool, even though I'm in the text tool. And I'm going to select all these guys and I'm going to copy them. And I think I can just now select that with the text tool in my author section. I'm going to say select all, and I'm going to paste that in here. And let's see, how good of a job did that do? Not too bad. It did do it in the right order. And I've got all my separations. Actually, that worked out pretty well.
Oh, so that's now one text object instead of a bunch.
Exactly. Yeah. And let's just finish that off here with this. And I hit, so direct select tool, select all those guys, copy back over here to my template. I am going to highlight all of this, Command A, select all, and Command V to paste in. And yeah, that's not so bad. So what you so like I said, I pasted them in and it remembered the styling that it was in, or it homogenized it. Either way, it's not in the styling that I just had in there, and I would like
Right.
to have it in. Well, this is kind of a big thing and a big feature that is extremely powerful and probably very, very little used, but it is a key feature to these templates. And we've gone through the trouble of creating what are the paragraph styles. Paragraph and character styles will govern globally across any document that you create, as long as those sections or those text areas are applied with these styles, they will govern them globally. So if I have a series of boxes that are all styled with the body text section, for example, I can later on modify that in this palette in the body text settings, and it'll apply that globally. So really, you can kind of you can manage all your text from one place, and I'll show you how that kind of plays out. So I want to revert this back to oh, you know what? I just remembered. I don't think this was. Oh no. Okay, this is definitely gonna be edited out. But here I'm gonna fix this right now. Here's what happened is we don't have a paragraph style for this
Title.
for the titling. Yeah, but I can fix that super fast, and I'll create one actually, which is actually a good thing to demo.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna copy these and I'm gonna go back in time and I'm gonna hold down undo. Let's see that far. Almost. It's a slight delay, so I'm getting okay. So I want this Helvetica 84 title text to be a paragraph style. So I'm going to create that right now. And I'm going to go down here and say create new in my paragraph style section. I have this selected on here, and I can highlight some text. And that's actually the best way to do it in Illustrator is highlight a section of text and say create new. And then in here, I can I'm going to name this title text. Oops, text. How about that? And then there's the author names. I'm going to copy that actually from directly from there and create a paragraph style that is that. And I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to do the same thing with affiliations. Okay, click that one. And what I've just done is each time I created new, it's actually grabbing the style of the font that it was in there. So it knows it's Helvetica. It's no F48 point type. It knows what the leading was, and it's captured all of that in the paragraph style. So that way, if I go to now, let's see. This is definitely coming out in post.
No, remember, I love these little like unexpected opportunities for more learning. I think it's great. You can edit it out if you want. I have the most experience doing paragraph and character styles in InDesign.
Yes.
And that's the software that is the hardest to learn. And it is Adobe product, but it is has the most tools for doing text layout in general, anything for print. That's where I first made scientific posters, excuse me, was in InDesign. I think that these features maybe came later in Illustrator. I'm not really sure, but
yeah, definitely. Or they're used to lesser capacity just because you don't end up. It's a rare occasion where you're laying out very complicated text documents in Illustrator, but when you need them, they're here. And this is one of these situations, a poster like this, where Illustrator really does it does shine for creating posters like this. And yeah, so this is a feature, use it. So now I go down to my author name section. I can just apply that. And you can see it's just this easy. I can go through here and just click on these. Hello. Selected properly and clicking on it and applying it. So what it's not doing is it's not remembering these little anomalies. So like basically
Yeah.
this is a superscript, but I can easily go into my character palette. I can highlight those elements and apply it. And there I have it. I have applied those directly to this template and I can off and running. So
Can you
now laying
just,
out the,
oh, sorry. Can you just show what happens when you edit one of those paragraph styles? Or did you want to do that later?
oh yeah, no, that's a good idea.
Like with nothing
Okay,
selected, right?
yeah. So I'm going to add a little spaces here. So say I think that my, for example, my title here isn't quite large enough. I want it to be, or maybe I want it to be, I kind of realized here, like, oh, maybe it's not sitting up here, right along the top border of this logo. I just want to make some adjustments. So, and I kind of find that, okay, this is kind of meeting the bottom of that one. Let's see here. Okay. And now if I kind of, say I'm just zhuzhing things around and I'm kind of find out that that's not exactly ideal. I want it to be larger. So I could go ahead and increase that. So anyway, I'm happy with that. And you can actually adjust this. And this is something that really is, these aren't end all be all templates. What I just showed you about modifying these, that totally does apply to however stylistically you want to, you want this template to live in perpetuity within your own library. So if you grab this thing, it doesn't mean that you have to have this point size here at 90 points, and you, it must always start from that. Whatever your current style is, you need to understand the tools and be able to use them for yourself. So understanding how to update the styles is really important to getting this sort of to your taste. So say I do think that the titling should be larger. Say I want it to be 100 points. Say I also want it to be, oh, this is a nice little feature. When you're holding down using the object select tool, I'm holding down, or I can click on that and get it, the object select tool in my tool palette. I can see here these little handles that are in this text box. I'm gonna double click on that and it'll automatically jump to open the frame large enough so I can see all the hidden text. You can see I have a little indicator here, this little red box with a little plus sign. That's indicating there's overset text or text that's hidden in this box. I know that's a red flag. I can come here, double click on this, and it'll expose all of the hidden copy. But say I've decided I want it bigger, and maybe I actually want the leading to be a little bit higher too. So I'm going to go into my character palette. I can see here, this is the line spacing or the leading. I'm going to also increase that maybe to about 100 too. And that's better for me. I like to adjust that and I want that to be consistent as I move forward. But as you can see here now, I've got a little plus sign next to my paragraph style. So that's actually means that it's modified locally. So if I were to hit this again, it would snap it back to where it was. So I need to reestablish or redefine what that text style is. And you can actually do that. And here in this little menu here, it says redefine paragraph style. But the way to do that is actually select a section rather than the whole thing. And then you can go into, make sure that it's selected, redefines paragraph style. And there you have it. That text, that plus sign's gone away. And now that's been updated and modified personally.
So that was a way for you to take the change you made locally and apply it to that style.
Exactly. So yeah, let's bring over some other elements too. This, but before actually I go down below, because that was the sort of header section, I guess we should talk about the grid that I have.
Yeah, let's talk about the grid.
Yeah, so a lot of this is the formatting options or the sort of spacing issues that we saw here can really be helped out or resolved by just defining an underlying grid, which there's a lot to be said for a grid system in design. A lot of naysayers and a lot of people who are who promote the heck out of it and sort of live and die by it. But it really is meant to be just another tool. So it's here to help you sort of figure out the proportions and separations of things. But I think we'll show you how to use it and how to break it too. I think within reason. First of all, so each one of these separations consists of 2 lines. The space in between the lines is sort of considered the gutter, versus on the exterior part of it is the margin. We got the margin set to be a little bit more hefty or a little bit more proud than the gutters in between. Also, a typical sort of proportion. And then something to note is that that separation of the gutters, it defines the separation between text boxes. And also it doesn't only apply to the separation horizontally, but also separation vertically. So as you create separate sections, that separation here, which I think, what did we define that as? I think, trying to remember what the length of that was. Find that out. We just, okay. So I have my ruler set in inches.
3/4.
Yeah.
It looks like
3/4 of an inch. Yeah. 0.75. So we can also define that as the vertical distance that you would separate. So, it's not always going to fall right on the grid, but that's the sort of separation that I would expect to use vertically as well. And then within that, I'll just note that basically there's 12 columns going across horizontally. And that is intended specifically because 12 is a nice number divisible by a multitude of variables. So you could have 3 columns, 4 columns, 2 columns, or what else?
Probably not 6, but
yeah, probably not 6. But but then within that, you can also kind of switch that up to be to mix and match. So you could have, you can define your 2 column section here, and then maybe the last one takes up double the width, which is much like this layout is. But then similarly as this layout to define, we can define sections. And these rows, which are also broken down into 5 rows or 4 rows. So that can sort of help you define the consistency here too. So we can just quickly create a layout that is falling on this grid, and you can see very similar to what we have over here, but the proportions are just made more consistent. So yeah, I think that's a good way of sort of blocking those out. But let's go back here, and I'll show you how quickly how to update these elements. Oh gosh, we're running out of time already. We haven't even talked about. I feel like time flies when you're having fun, right?
It does. It does. Oh, all of those are separate.
Yeah, they are separate, but actually, they're going to come in just fine. I'm going to copy all these guys.
You never seem worried.
Nah. I don't want these 2 because those are the bullets. I know that. And then I'm going to paste this in. And this portion of the copy is coming in as yeah, what is it coming in as? Let's apply text body. There we go. Snaps right to it. But I know these were bullets in the last one. Well, we got you covered there too, because there is a body text bullets character. That's going to slightly vary because of the indent that needs to happen for body for bullets. So just to recapitulate what we see over there and include that.
Oh, I see. It's one big bullet, but you can add some returns in there.
Yeah. Well, what you need to do Yeah, and you also need to select this element and apply the bullet, which you do up here on your tool. Let's see, is this not behaving for some reason? Oh, I see. Oh, that's just, oh, this is a good, you can see what's happening here now. These were defined and these were actually not really applied as bullets. So I want to redefine these as bullets. Those are actually typed in characters. I don't know who made this, but it's a good rule. Let's apply these as actual bullets. All right, so now those are consistent and you can see that the formatting is wrong, but we can fix that. Let's go in here into the body bullets section. We are given our whole host of different characteristics that are defined in here. I'm going to go back in here. I could do it and adjust these indents in this dialog, or I can go into this tab section and get a more visual thing. I'm definitely more visual. The other thing that's really what I don't like about this is that I currently have the increment set to inches, which I don't typically think of when I think of type. I think of points. But anyway, I can just go in here and adjust these. So I adjust them both to 0.25. And I can say OK. And you can see that that took care of automatically. I saw a preview of that happening to confirm it. Go about my business. All right. So I'm just sort of approximating there where there was a second bullet. Yeah, and I can bring in my introduction title. I can paste it in there. I can also paste actually without styles. Should be able to. Paste without formatting. It does not have a key command for it, but it is in the dropdown under Edit, Paste without formatting, and that can just drop in there, and it can retain my styles for that. I'm just gonna select that whole thing and get rid of that little X. I'm gonna, oh, look at that. Okay, I need to redefine that style too, because I'm now noticing. Okay. Cool. Yeah. But I think, was there anything else we wanted to go to? Yes, we did. We wanted to talk about justification.
Yep.
I mean, I don't think we can.
This is really compressed too.
Yeah, actually, let's take a look at that. So let's take a look at let's dive back into this box because I wanted to, but just before we do that, let's talk about this issue I think we have with that we see a lot, which is a tendency for folks to want to have fully justified type. I'm talking about type that basically, rather than it being aligned and you have a rag or the lines and at different points that they are going edge to edge and look like this, fully clean and aligned to the edge. All but the last line. There are several different settings for justified. One is to do fully justified, which we could apply, and that'll actually make the last line spread out edge
Super
to edge.
weird.
As the yeah, very bizarre. Nobody ever does it. Don't do it unless you're expert at applying this. But otherwise, what we typically see is this kind of full justification.
What happens if you make that second introduction block fully justified?
Oh, this guy?
Yeah, will that make it more evident?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Yes, that's a terrible example. Okay, thank you. So so this one I'll keep as right aligned. Let's see, set that as the style. And this one I'm going to modify. And yeah, this will be justified to the left. And so, yeah, what the ending result basically is that you end up with these awkward gaps in between,
Mhm.
and they're referred to as rivers typographically. But like basically, the separation between each word ends up being stretched out, and it just becomes an interruption in the flow, and actually slows down reading, and it
For sure.
it's getting in the way of somebody's ability to skim over text. So generally speaking, this is just an unwritten rule, I think is what I've heard it sort of defined as. But it's certainly a rule that you almost never use justified text. No self-respecting designer would actually do that. They are very specific purposes for this use. But generally speaking, if you want your audience to be able to read through something quickly,
Mhm.
then do not use this. Um,
I think
which I,
people feel like it's balanced, right? But
yes,
the
and it's neat.
negatives, right? But the negatives far outweigh that because it's hard to read. And I don't know if there are still magazines or newspapers. Sometimes they will use Justified, but I think
Oh yeah,
they've got experts doing other things to sort of enhance the readability that you don't
right.
get if you just click that button and it
And
does that.
there's a video that I think we're going to link to, and that anyone interested in having fully justified should really understand those parameters and understand what it really takes to be able to make and to massage content. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not just a click of the button to say justify this and go. It really does turn into a really awful looking layout typographically, and it really does. I think it's part of that like visual indicator that you don't know what about it, but it doesn't feel professional.
Right.
It doesn't feel like it's a polished, professionally published kind of element. You get much better results in managing your paragraph spacing, or your paragraph layout when you have a standard left alignment of copy. And that goes the same for all your, make sure that things agree. You don't want to be swapping back and forth. You don't want to have something that elements, as you said before, center aligned and fully justified and left aligned, and that really is part of like having bullets. You can't have those sort of center aligned. You have to have them left aligned. So just make it all left aligned.
Can we look at that if we center aligned it just to see?
Oh yeah, how awful that looks.
Because
Yeah,
I do see,
never ever do this. Never
yeah,
ever. Yeah.
I do see
And
that a lot too.
this looks especially bad because it's also being managed by the tabs. So if I actually look at the tabs for this, and I can bring up the tabs box, I can go to window. I don't even know where this is. I don't know where anything is. Type tabs. There you go. I used the keyboard shortcut Command Shift T, and that'll pop it up, and you can actually see here where the tabs kind of sit. Um, so if I highlight this bit of text for this, this is also getting affected, and I could revert this back to 0. But that really doesn't help it anymore. It's just it's an awful look.
And again, I think people think this looks balanced and they like
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
but as we said, I think it really only works for like some poetry. But otherwise,
yeah.
you're forcing your reader's eyes to move a lot more than they need to. And
Right.
better to just make peace with that ragged right end, which is what happens if you
Which actually
left.
I heard somebody describe that as actually helping the reader, because you kind of see the difference from line to line, and that's another visual indicator that you sort of know where you left off when you're reading to the next line.
Yeah.
Um, and there's also we also probably should talk about where is the sweet spot for line length,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that really does also include how many characters across you're asking your audience to read. You definitely don't want to exceed too many, because it does make it very difficult for somebody to read a line of text, then make it down to the next line and remember where they left off. The rules vary depending on who you ask, and also depending on the font, but the general is around 50 to 70 characters, which I always translate, and I learned it was about 9 to 12 words in length.
Yeah.
So that's also, it's a little less precise, but it is a good little gut check that I use.
And so both all of the templates, right? The PowerPoint and the Word
Yeah.
templates, the columns are set to maximize that preferred line length. And so that is something
Yeah.
that I think a lot of people don't realize is intentional and is important, because it's one of those invisible design things that we talked about, right? Where it's not something you notice because it's optimized and working well. And so I think it would be important to note, if you use this grid to like widen some of those sections, then
Yeah.
you got to be extra, you'll probably go into the same place, but you got to be extra careful about your line length. And maybe, you know, if you widen it, maybe it needs to be 2 columns of text or something. You have to do something to compensate for that, for what you're, you know, the possible increase in that line length, which we don't want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, drop them in. I think that while we're waiting and seeing how we'll move to PowerPoint in a second, I'll do the one last section that we talked about kind of covering, which I think is really a really kind of cool feature of Illustrator. And that's specifically like if you're dropping images in. So in PowerPoint, you kind of, when you're working with images, you kind of have to remember what resolution you're kind of dropping in. With Illustrator, you can kind of manage that all directly from Illustrator. So if I go to paste this image in, and I scale it, and I'm sort of placing it in my layout, and then remember that this layout is rather large. This particular template is 3 foot by 4 foot poster size, or a fairly typical poster size. Making sure that your image is large enough to be able to go in there, to be able to place at that scale, and to know the resolution, have the confidence it's not going to be printed pixelated,
Mm-hmm.
is something that is another layer of complexity that you got to manage while you're managing all your files. So if I select on here, then I see my toolbar that my PPI is already indicated to me in Illustrator, and it's telling me it's 55 by 58. So that's telling me 2 things. One, that's an insufficient amount of resolution, PPI meaning pixels per inch. That should be around the 300 mark, or at least the 200 mark, really. The other thing it's telling me is that it's telling me the number of pixels in a width height, and the fact that there's 2 different ones means that they're actually slightly out of skew. So, or the proportion is not perfectly square.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can see the same thing. Let's dive into a little bit more detail,
We
and
do
I'm
have
gonna go.
we do have one question too that we want to get to before we're done.
Okay, cool. Let's go quickly to our links palette. Yeah, I have it open over here. And so I've got this image selected, so I have it already selected here. And if I hit this little twirl down button, that will expand it, push, collapse a couple of other things so that I can see. Push this guy.
So the links is where all the things live that aren't drawn or created in Illustrator. So anything that,
right.
Graphics, that photos or images that you drop in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Usually pixel based artwork.
Yep. And there's a little twirl down here that gives information once you're selected on here. And if you twirl that thing down, I can see here that it tells me all the pertinent information about it. And so I can see here that this is scaled up 130% approximately. And I can see that the almost 130% in the horizontal direction, and 125% or so in the vertical dimension. So I know this is already skewed out of proportion. So that's a red flag for me. And I also know over here, this PPI, that actually it's too low of resolution. So even though it seems like it's scaled, the scale and the PPI are linked, in that the scale really is determined on the resolution at the size of the images. So this might be 90 PPI at 4 inches tall by 3 inches tall, and now this is 5 inches tall. So that's accounting for the scale difference. but the PPI is would then be reduced.
Right.
Yeah. So
They're like on a seesaw, right? If one goes up,
exactly.
the other goes down.
Yeah, exactly. So, so this is, I point this out because this is a good way to sort of check and be able to manage it, that you're at the right resolution, versus or excuse me, when you're in PowerPoint, that is a little bit more obscure.
So we do have
So
this
what's the
one
question?
question with our last 2 minutes. What would be a good way to represent IF data if one wants a darker background? This is with reference to not having those blocks of white on a colored background being off-putting. Yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
I can ask the question if that's okay. So
Yeah.
what I mean is if you have a very large panel, say it is a panel of 4 rows by 6 columns, where you want to show a bunch of different data, where you have, say, for example, you have wild type versus some kind of treatments, and you want to have um, you have used antibodies to stain, say, 3 different kinds of proteins, and the panel is typically large, so you want people to focus on, say, multiple different blocks of images at a time. So one might prefer to have a darker background, so you can be able to pick out differences between the individual blocks. So how how would you recommend one depicts something like that on a poster? So in the bad poster demo that you showed, so you said that having those white blocks over a darker gray background, that can be quite off-putting, that the contrast can be a little jarring. So how would you suggest that be fit onto, in your opinion, how would you, what would be a very clear or a non-jarring way of depicting that kind of data?
Yeah. So I think, yeah, what you're kind of describing is basically, let's just pull in one of these and I'll just grab it from the web. And let's see, get this to behave. Okay, so this is one that I just pulled directly from what you kind of linked. No idea where it came from or who this is attributed to, but basically, what I understand is that these really weak signal areas, there might be a little bit low level light happening in here, and you do want somebody to be able to notice that, appreciate that, and with
Yeah,
the high
exactly.
contrast,
That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Yes.
okay, great. And with the high contrast of both the grid that's separating them and the background, you'd rather have that be sort of a neutral, or so that way it's not quite as high contrast, and those subtleties kind of come out more. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay, so I think yeah, it's a great question, and that's definitely not something that I think we are warning against. I think because that is sort of contained within the information of a single figure. I think you have a lot of latitude within within your microscopy or your figure samples to be able to create what's best for that sort of singular image. So with that, I would say, yeah, to solve this issue that you're sort of describing, I wouldn't shy away from actually putting this on something that would be a little bit um, uh, like a gray background overall. And then you could adjust the typography that's sitting on the top of it to either to have high enough contrast. So I might reverse out the copy and the labeling, so that way maybe they're white and on a 50% gray background. But that's all sort of contained within this single figure. And it's not really talking about the overall design.
Right.
Yeah. So I think there you're totally safe. That's sort of not within the sort of scope that we were sort of talking about, which is, you have all these interruptions of these white boxes over the top of this sort of underlying theme that's applied to it. This, I would say, is so specific to this one figure, and it's really meant for the clarity or enhancing clarity on that.
All right, yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would agree. That's a great question, though, because yeah, you want to optimize that figure for the clarity that it needs, and I think that works just fine within this broader framework of the clean, template.
Yeah,
and it is more that sort of odd kind of pattern that all of that contrast creates that I think can be tiresome. But I don't feel that way about this.
Yeah, and it's kind of tricky, like how much of a border do you apply? And it really, you know, maybe it is the sort of these dividing sections that really need the most of the help. There's no real easy way to do this very quickly. But say you did create, some of these more neutral sort of grid and you created more separation, maybe that's going to achieve what you're kind of after. And then depending on how much of a margin you really need around there, what is really going to achieve that lower amount of contrast. Yeah, I mean, it's really sort of dependent on what the final print outcome is.
I like this question too, because it's sort of, a lot of times we will use a white outline if you want increased contrast, like for accessibility or for readability. And here we're kind of exploring the opposite, where we want to lower that contrast, right? So that we can appreciate the subtlety.
Yeah.
And I think principles of like color perception work, obviously they work both ways, and either way can be used as a tool.
Yeah. I'm trying to do this quick and dirty, but it is. It's also so large too, because usually not working on such a scale, so the increments are so different. But yeah, I think that's thanks for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
We're gonna continue on, right? So we can get this on the books for the PowerPoint. So hang out if you want to, sign out if you don't. There's no offense to that. But Tammy, do you want to take it away and switch over to PowerPoint and see about how you would achieve most of the same stuff, but the PowerPoint way?
Sure thing. You'll see a couple things that are going to be similar. I can zoom in and show you that we've got that grid dropped into there that you can use. So we're going to apply all the same principles that we had in Illustrator over here in PowerPoint. A couple things I want to show first. If I go to page setup, everyone's been here before, right? So this is our custom size. If you want to make a PowerPoint into a poster, it's a lot larger. I just wanted to point out that you can only go up to 56 inches in either direction in PowerPoint. And so sometimes, yeah. And so sometimes your posters are 72. And so that is one of the first limitations of PowerPoint, is that you cannot get as big as you can in an Illustrator file. So there are a couple, we've done some, like you can sometimes print your PDF at 150 or 200%. Scares us, that idea, but it is doable. So I just wanted to point that out, that there are size limits to a PowerPoint slide or file, I guess, right? Because it's really not intended to be a giant poster.
Yeah, you're going to have to work with some workarounds rather than just it's going to be slightly less predictable. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's see. If I guess I already added a new slide. All right.
Why don't you start out by telling us about how you use the master elements? Because I think we talked about master elements in PowerPoint, and you have a grid laid in here
that you have to turn off, right?
Yeah, and I think that's important too, because if you're going to use this, you're probably be banging your head against the wall if you trying to figure out how to get rid of this background grid. But I think we talked about it and we figured out this is probably the best way just to be able to inform, and we can leave that in the notes there in the instructions in the margin. But but just be aware of that this grid is set in the master elements.
Yeah, and so I know we've talked about this in a previous design lab. You may or may not have ever looked into the master slides, but out here, we're out in a slide deck. We just have one slide. But if you go to view master slide master, then this is where all the styles are set for any template that let you populate it with content, whether it's a slide deck or whether it's this poster.
If you ever tried to get rid of a font and can't figure out where it is, it's probably sitting in the masters.
Yeah. So the master is kind of where you set up the template, and then all of the slides take on those styles. And so that's where I set up this poster template. That's where the sizes for the text boxes are set. That's where this gray box lives and the logo, so that you don't move those around accidentally. And so this is also where this grid lives. And this is also where you can kind of play around with the styles that will then impact your slide deck or your poster. So if you, I'm in the slide master. If I go to home and then go up to selection pane, I say this every time, but this is my best friend in PowerPoint because it's kind of like the layers palette of any other software. And so this is where, you can, if you're having trouble selecting things, you can select them over here. So let's hunt and find where that grid is. Oh, I know, the grid's up here. All right, good to know. The grid is on the, this is the slide master, and then this is the one layout. So a master.
Can you make that bigger, Tammy? Can you pull that little margin over on the, no, in the,
oh, here.
Yeah.
This, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect.
So anytime you're in a slide master, any sort of PowerPoint file, there's the slide master, sort of like the one ring to rule them all. And then below that are all the slide layouts. So in our case, we just have one slide layout. But if you were in a deck, you might have multiple different slide layouts. Because this is our poster, we've only made one. We just have one here. So I chose to put that grid over here. So because it's on the slide master, it's not going to be touchable when we're working on our poster. So we won't accidentally move this logo. We won't accidentally pick up this grid or even this thing here. But you eventually, if we use this grid, you do want to go over to the selection pane and just turn it off. And then when you export your poster, you won't have that grid. So we're in here to kind of show you that that's where this is turned on and off.
And also to say that this is as much a space for you as it is for us. It's not, you really should know where you can go in and move those elements, because it can be extremely frustrating when you're trying to move an element that is just, you cannot select. But this is how you do it. We're not locking them down with the intention of hiding that from people.
Yeah.
But it's really meant to get out of the way of your normal process or course of action as you're going through and designing things.
Yep. So we're kind of showing you how to lift the hood and see, tinker a little bit if you want to. So I'm still on that slide master view. So I'm going to go back to a normal slide, unless there's something else we wanted to look at there. If I got rid of this, right, I would just do new slide and I'd get a blank slate. I would click here to start entering my title, so these are placeholders, which means they disappear. They're just holding prompt text, right? But they have all the formatting that you want. So we would put our poster title in here, our affiliations. You cannot you'd have to manually do the superscripts as you did in Illustrator. You can't even sort of set a style as far as I know. But basically, similar to Illustrator, we've got our grid so that we can kind of start populating this with our content, and then we can start playing around, with the width of, we could make this column wider, pulling it all the way over to that guide. Same with this text box, so you can start really playing around with, you could have 3 columns like this, a small, a wide, and then a small again. We could even set them up with blocks down here, like what Giovanni did in Illustrator. So we're trying to set up a similar sort of flexible grid that you can use if you're using PowerPoint. And I can copy and paste some text into here from that other poster if we want to see it start to build out. A couple other things, we talked about this just prior to this workshop, but, I added some padding into these text boxes so that you can, once you fill them with text, you can butt them right up to other elements and you'll get a spacing in there.
Which is actually a little bit more handy than even the Illustrator one is. I think that this is a little bit more plug and play and a little less dependent on the user managing the separation of elements, because you can really set, if you actually, Tammy, if you double click on one of those and look at the formatting pane, then you can look at how you can adjust those. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Over here?
Yeah, exactly. And under the text box, that one. Yeah, so we have the left margin set at 0.2, top is at 1/4 inch, and the bottom is at 0.45 inches. So those are basically, you can just have the boxes butting up against each other, but they have those baked in margins. So that way they kind of always stand in the same module separation from each other. I think that's actually the most beneficial thing.
I'm going to open that demo file, and I'm going to get it out of our way, and then I'm going to copy and paste some content into here. Oh no, there it is. All right. And then we can start to see this take shape. So if you can't see this, but I'm going to copy that title. So if you're copying, you could just type right in here if you knew your title, but chances are you're going to copy it from another PowerPoint file or a Google Doc or some kind of document. So I've copied it. I'm going to do paste and match formatting, or help me out with that.
Yeah.
Control Option, no, Shift Control Command V.
Yes.
That's what buttons. I just said.
Yeah.
And so, that took this white text that was formatted in this PowerPoint and retained the formatting of our template, and now it's over here. And so I could go through and do that. Same with the investigator names. Oh, you know what?
You know what you got? You get a couple of trailing spaces. I always hit delete, so that way it gets rid of those. You'll probably get the same thing when you're pasting.
Let's see.
Yeah.
All right, so copy, investigator names. Yep, there it was. And then I would go through and sort of set these manually up here. Probably, oh, that comma probably also needs to be.
Yeah.
Right? And that one.
Ski comma.
And that one. So I'm doing Shift Command Option V. And again, it seems to be putting a bunch of returns in there, so you just have to delete if that happens to you. I'm going to set my superscripts here. One more. Oh, I see. Some little letters got stuck over there. And then the same thing as we're populating these other fields, this headers, the content boxes. Again, I can type right in here, so I could type in introduction. Whoops. Or I could paste that from something else and just do that edit, paste and match formatting, or the keyboard shortcut for that. And then I'm going to take some text, paste that in here. And then here's where you can better appreciate that spacing, where we've got a little margin at the top so that we have some breathing room between that header, and then a little bit at the bottom so we could really push this right up against it. And it does look like it even aligns with our grid. So that's an easier way for you to keep a consistent spacing rather than sort of eyeballing with these preset little margins in there. So, you can imagine how this is going to go. You're just going to slowly build up your poster, populating, whoops, that's weird. Populating, I guess we started with lowercase letter. But you'll see something that happened here where, elements in PowerPoint are going to overlap with each other. So we can just start scaling things to sort of make it fit our content, right? So I've got a little, move that out of the way. I've got this figure title box. I've got this here. All right, and this, again, we have our margin at the top, margin at the bottom, so we can really align things without having to add additional rulers or anything. I'm going to show you how to, let's do a quick figure one. And then I'm going to show you, these are placeholders that will hold your figures. If you click on this, you can insert it that way. I'm just going to grab an image that I have on my desktop. So one thing about these placeholders is that it keeps the box size the same, and fits your image into it, but it gets cropped out. There's another kind of placeholder in PowerPoint, a content placeholder, and that will adjust the box to the size of the image. In this case, though, we want to keep our nice columns the same width, and we want our images to be column width. So these are all just picture placeholders. Chances are all of your figures will be, they won't be live charts. They'll probably be exports from R or from Adobe Illustrator or something like that. So we want to import those all as pictures. And then if I right click, I can go to crop. And then here is where I could either decide I really only need, the top portion of this, and I could crop my image, and then I don't see any of that that's beyond the borders. Or if I really wanted to show this whole thing, I'm just clicking undo, then I could scale this all to fit within the boundaries of my box. And then, I might want to think about, is that too small? Maybe I need to, oops, I don't want to do that. Maybe I need to enlarge my box and then crop a little bit in so that I'm not scaling it. You can see that it started to scale because I was stretching in only one direction. So you can play around with how much of your image fits in there, and then you'll move things around as needed to fit it into your nice columns. This might be a good candidate for something over here. If we wanted sort of that wider column, we could move that over here. You can also delete extra, we put extras in here. You can delete them if you don't need them. If you need additional ones, I would suggest that you duplicate a text placeholder instead of inserting a text box, because this has that formatting already set for the text, the spacing, the font sizes, the color, all of that is preset in here. So it's better to sort of copy and paste a new one of these than insert a text box. So let's say that I wanted to sort of move this over here. I could, if I had a really big figure, this is my opportunity with this wider column. I do want to point out, though, that this is something I just grabbed off of the web. And so it is not print quality, it's screen quality, which is much lower. So this is something you actually don't want to do in your poster, because when it prints, it's going to be really soft and pixelated, and not in a way that's going to be good. So my rule of thumb is to sort of, if I know, let's undo, Control Z. So if I know that my column widths are, let's see what they are over here. So they're about almost 11 inches wide. I would create my figures at 11 inches wide so I could bring them in at 100%. Already I can see that this has been scaled. If I look over here at 210%, I would discourage you from ever scaling up in PowerPoint. Maybe you could get away with 10%, but the best rule of thumb is to create your figures at the size you need in your poster, export from whatever you've created them in at 300 DPI resolution if you can get that, and then bring them in so that they are in your poster at high resolution at 100%, and then that's going to be your best possible print quality. So as you can see, we have this, what would this be, results? So we have this flexible grid, right, where we sort of resize. We could make maybe 2-column poster. I had mentioned before about being careful. We probably don't want a 6-column poster. Here's where we get into the issue of the line length. So we want you to have the flexibility to sort of create different layouts. This would be pretend this isn't there. This would be like a 3-column layout. Maybe we'd go back to having 4 columns down here, depending on sort of the type of content you have. But we want to be careful about that line length. So if I just copy this and I paste this in here, this, is probably much longer. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is about 1.5 times the optimal line length for reading. So while it is sometimes great to have sort of a wider column for data or for figures, we want to be cognizant of our readers with that line length. So a couple of things you could do. You could, depending on how it fit, you could sort of reduce this, maybe your figure is over here and it takes that whole width of that column. That might be one solution. Another solution is you could go up to here and do format columns, and you could make this, you could play around with, columns, and then the space between columns. So, those are a couple options to just always keep in mind, that we want this to be readable, and that's really what's going to make it very professional. So if you do play around with the width, making some columns wider, just remember the optimal line length, which is about, I think Giovanni said 8 to 10 words. I always learned it was 60 to 80 characters. And so that's a little bit harder to gauge. Words you could sort of count, or you could do a word count in Word. If you're not sure, you could select a line of text and go into Word and check the word count there. Let's see, what else? Oh, I just wanted to clarify, we have these guides here. You could also, or this grid. Well, I just walked into what I wanted to clarify. So there's a difference between a grid and guides. And so a grid could be built out of guides, but guides aren't the same as a grid. So we imported this background grid to sort of help you if you want to shift around elements and widen some columns. What I was thinking is you could pull in a bunch of guides. It would be a lot of work to make them sort of match our grid here. And then you would have the ability to snap to things. It's a little bit painstaking to add guides to PowerPoint, but you could do that. Our sort of cheat for you that was a little bit easier was to have this grid back there. But wanted you to know the difference between grid and guides. And so assuming that we had our poster completely fleshed out, we would go back to View, Master, Slide Master. We would go up here to where our grid is, and then we would go to the selection pane, which is always only available when you hit home, and we would turn that off. And then we would go back, and this is where we would save. We would do our export to PDF from here, with making sure that that grid didn't end up in our actual poster. A couple other things I'll show, and then I'll do a quick demo of how to export to a PDF, and then we'll be good. So a couple other things. I could copy and paste some images from our other deck. So I just did a demonstration about how to use the placeholders to insert your picture because they're already sized to be the correct width. I could do just, paste from Illustrator sometimes, or even PowerPoint. And then I would want to just sort of, well, let's go back and turn our guides back on, or our grid. Right, visibility, here we go, normal. So we could use this to sort of scale. You can even see that we have smart, I turned on the smart guides, view guides, smart guides. So it'll try to snap, it's snapping to the other elements. I'm not sure what it's snapping to here. Gosh, is it smart enough to snap to that grid lines? No, I don't think so. It's snapping to something else. Maybe that's the middle. That's probably the middle of the slide. So we could do that. Again, I just want to caution you about scaling things up in PowerPoint. This looks like 125. Oh, right, 125, 130. So it's not scaling equally. We already learned that in the Illustrator demo. But if you did paste without using the placeholders, then you can use that grid to sort of make things more consistent with your columns that you have set up here. In general, I would say to stick to the placeholders because they are sized correctly for your whole layout. You could always go smaller, of course. Let's say for some reason you had a reason to do kind of a more narrow column. Let's do format columns. Let's turn this back into 1. That might be too short a line length, but there might be a reason. I think in our not so great example, there was a short column. So, and then if we look over here, this thing, now we're at under 100. We probably would want to, let's see if we can make those the same. Whoops. Oh, 84. Oh, let's just type it in. That's a good idea. Okay. So now we don't have that off scaling problem. It is also smaller than, we haven't scaled it past 100%. So I like that. We still haven't solved the question of where did this come from, but that's okay. Oh, you can see with smart guides enabled, I can bump right up to that. The guides kind of tell me when I'm there. So that's my way of getting that perfect spacing. So imagine that we have populated this whole poster with all of the content. We've got, a bunch of different columns that we want. We've got our text beautifully formatted. We've got our beautiful spacing. We're almost ready. So what are the final things we want to think about when we're ready to export to PDF? One thing I would want to do personally is I would want to kind of redistribute these 3 lines I have up here. So if I select each of those and I use the align tools, I will go to distribute vertically. Oh, that doesn't look right at all though, does it? Maybe we need to tighten this up. All right, let's try that again. A lot of this has to do with, oh, that's better. The type of settings over here in your text box. So even if you pull things from the template, you can still revise them at the slide level. If you go over here and you can sort of change some, the padding elements, you can change some of the settings here, though these get a little scary. But just know that even if you pull from the template at the level of the individual slide or the poster in this case, you can go over here and change some of these settings. So I just wanted them to be more evenly spaced. It still looks a little odd to me, so I might just kind of eyeball it. I'm just hoping to get sort of visually spacing between these. I feel like that's pretty good. And in general, my rule of thumb would be you want to keep it within the boundaries of this box with the logo. So we want, and things will get nudged as you're working, but we definitely want to sort of contain this within the height, the top and bottom of that logo and that block that the logo is inside of. So that looks pretty good to me. If we had maybe a poster title that was 3 lines, well, I would discourage that, first of all. But second of all, we would have to maybe reduce the size of our text, which I would not want you to do. The title of your poster should be the biggest text on the page. It should be something that someone can see from a distance as they're walking through the room. You want them to catch your title and want to come look at your poster. Some people have said it should be readable in a photo taken from a smartphone. So that's why we really want to keep this, as big as we've set it, if not bigger in some cases. If you had a single line, maybe you'd want it to be bigger. You want that to be as big as it can so that it is viewable from across the room. You could do a test with that cell phone if you wanted to. So assuming we've got a lot of our elements in here, we've got our columns set up the way that we want them. We aren't necessarily going to print from PowerPoint. So we want to save a PDF. So we would go to File. Nope, not print. We would go to File, Save As, and then we're going to choose PDF here. And then we're going to click OK. Sometimes on Windows, there are a couple different check boxes that you can do to make that PDF. If you have the option of sort of interactive versus print, you definitely want to choose print. Let's go see what that PDF looks like. I got to remember where I saved it. Oh, all right. It's in our demo folder. We'll go take a look at it, even though it's not actually complete. All right, so there's our PDF that was made from our template. 7.5 megabytes. That's not so big. We only have 2 images in there, and one of them is low res. Oh, well, here we go. That's what it looks like if you forget to turn that grid off. So let's go back. Go to View Master, Slide Master. We're going to go up here. We're going to go over, let's make that fit a little bit better. We're going to go over to the selection pane. We're going to hide the grid. If you want to get out of the master, you can either close master here, or you could go to View Normal. All right, now let's do another PDF. And I keep going to print because sometimes people will want to print to a PDF, and I don't recommend that. I think you should always do save as PDF. All right, so let's go back to our PDF, take a look at that. There it is again. I overwrote it, so it's the same file name. There we go. So obviously it's incomplete, but we have no grid lines. So that's looking good. I think that there's also probably some trim marks that we should have added, but we could add those in Acrobat as well. So for fun, I think I want to go back and replicate that not so great poster in this poster template. So for fun, let's go ahead and rebuild this entire bad poster in our new template. So I'll go over here, add a new slide, and I'm just going to start copying and pasting from our old poster into our new poster and clean up some of the things that we already identified that we could sort of do better in our new template. So here we go. So I'm just copying over here, pasting. And it always seems to add those returns, right? There's no way around that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's unclear where you're picking them up because sometimes they get auto added. But yeah, I always try to be aware of when there's extra, they call it trailing white space, extra blank characters or spaces after things you've pasted in. I always try to remove those just because they tend to get in the way when you least expect it. So might as well just move them as an obstacle.
I can't always figure out where they come from either. So just as a reminder, I'm doing edit, paste and match formatting, or I'm doing the keyboard shortcut for that. And I'm going to zoom into this one to really get in here with these. There's one there too. All right.
Yeah, zooming in and out is like one of the biggest productivity problems that I have with PowerPoint. Like, you can Command plus, on a Mac to zoom in, which is the same as you might do on Illustrator. But Illustrator, you can get so much closer, and Illustrator also created what they call like a scrubby zoom, where you can actually hold down. You could do a key command where you hold down the space bar plus command, and then you basically can, click and drag your mouse, and you can zoom very quickly in on a certain point. So it's always great to like be able to, from a productivity standpoint, be able to zoom into those elements that you really got to pay attention to what you're doing, and then be able to zoom back out. PowerPoint doesn't quite have an equivalent. So you're pasting in there, and you're able to like you're adding in the bullets and helping to reformat because some of that native stuff doesn't always translate.
Yeah, and I'm making sure I'm doing left alignment instead of the forced justification that we saw over here.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna, let me see. So I'm not gonna use this. So normally I would, and what I already showed earlier is I would use this placeholder to get our image in there exactly perfect within the dimensions of that frame. In this case, isn't there a way I can copy and paste into that? Or no?
Yeah, you can actually paste from clipboard.
Like that?
Yep.
Oh, wild. Okay, cool. And so as I showed before, when you use these placeholders, instead of adjusting to the image size, it keeps the frame the exact size you have it, which is what we want because we want that column width. But then the results are a little bit unpredictable about how the picture fits inside. So this is where we want to right click to crop and kind of get that to fit into that space nicely.
Which I figure some people might say like, oh, well, that's annoying because it just crops it even when I don't want it to, and then I always have to go in there. But I think the advantage is that you can use that crop to then maybe, maybe your image does bleed a little bit, but at least then those edges are always going to be perfectly aligned. Or if the template was set up right, which yours obviously was. But that's a handy way of making sure that you're maintaining that alignment, and with a minor duty to go in there and adjust the crop.
I think it's good to learn how to crop in there, because once you know how to do that, you'll really optimize your figures or your photos or whatever you have in slides or posters. Once you know that trick, then you're going to want to get in there and tweak them and make them look really good.
Yeah.
And so we have our grid back here. That's again, back on our master slide. We don't have any guides, but you can see that we'll kind of snap up to that text box. And as we recall, that text box has that little padding underneath it. So this is another way that we can kind of get things perfectly spaced using the padding we have set up there without having those guides that we're going to snap to. So I'm going to pull this one up there. And so let's see. I'm going to borrow one of these, bring it over here. I'm going to do that same technique where I copied this and then I pasted. Oh, so cool. And then I'm going to right click to crop, and then I'm going to crop this one in here. And the usual caveat applies here, where we want to make sure these are adequate resolution and that we have the rights to use them, and they're going to print really nicely on our poster. We'd probably want that to be a little bit, whoops.
Grab the cop. You can tell that the marquee or the your cursor will change. So it gets that little corner icon if you're changing the actual crop, or you get the your standard arrows if you're actually grabbing the object.
And then I'm just going to borrow these figures. I don't need a caption for that one, so I can get rid of that. See, there's that extra space again. Okay, oops, figure one. So interestingly, in this old poster, the figure labels were below on this one, and they were below on that one. Never mind.
But I think you rightfully are putting them above them.
Yes.
And you could be
yes. Okay, and then we might consider the capitalization of our figure titles, but let's keep going. So we've got a little bit of text down here. Now in layout software, we'd be able to have one big text box and have our images situated inside of that, but I don't think we can do that here, right?
And if you notice the person who made the other poster or our original example there, they did create a single text box, and here they used the little trick of I don't think it's a good trick.
A million returns.
The million or the return until you get it separated. But yeah, I would do exactly what you just did, which is just copy down the cell or the text box that you originally created and formatted, copy that over, and then paste in that new copy. So that way you don't have to redo all of the formatting. You're borrowing all of that and you're pasting it back in the content, and just that way you can manage all the spacing rather than having to depend on that return.
And it's got all that formatting that we've already set in the template. So that's another reason. And I believe I already said this, but instead of adding a text box, you want to duplicate one of these that's already there, because it's got the font and the spacing and that little padding and everything already set up to be consistent for you.
Exactly. Save yourself some time.
Right. There's that stuff again. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to set these as bullets. And then, whoops, where did that happen? So we've got this narrow column. So I'm going to use my grid, and I don't know, do we want to try like that? We'll probably have to adjust some things.
Yep.
Let's try that. We can always play around with it later. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to duplicate or just copy and paste. Is there a duplicate? Whoops.
Well, I would do control or an option drag. And then
all right, let's try that.
Yeah. So click and drag, holding down option. That'll almost.
Nice. All right.
And then you can also hold down shift while you do it. So it's actually a click, drag, shift, and option while you're doing that. And that way it should constrain to the vertical. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't waver.
All right.
Yeah. The shift will in across most applications will constrain to that vertical or horizontal axes.
Yeah, that is something I use everywhere, right? Illustrator, Photoshop. And then I noticed in this poster, all of these little elements are separate. So I would probably group those first. I'm going to select all, shift click to select all of those.
You missed one label there. This is the second bottom label.
Thank you. Arrange group. All right, I'm going to copy.
And option G.
Oh, paste. Yep. And then, oh, I see that there's a little white back there. I don't know if I need that. So one thing about this is it's not really conforming to our grid.
No, it does. It's like when it groups, it adds like a margin, like an invisible margin around the entire thing.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, it is a bummer. And it's a bummer because, Microsoft, if you're listening, because you can't accurately reduce things and align to, say, a guide or something like that you're trying to align it to. So
yeah, there's a ton of that space up here, right? So it's going to get messy. I mean, I can nudge it up there, but it bothers me that,
oh yeah,
it's not constrained.
Yeah, it requires a lot of like sort of guessing, or it's not super accurate. I would love for that in Illustrator, not like sound like I'm getting sponsored or we're getting sponsored by them, but like in Illustrator, the bounding box, it goes strictly to the edge of it. There's actually an alternate, you can adjust that depending on what you're selecting. But yeah, that's just to say that you have the user has the power to adjust that. The smart guides, though, work remarkably similar to Illustrator. I'd have to say that. And as you were pulling that over, you got indicators that the gutter or the spacing between these new columns that you're making, equaled up, and that's it's a nice consistent feature.
Yeah, once you have elements on there, then the smart guides will try to figure out how to make them work with what's already there.
They're not super smart guides, but they'll get it right most of the time.
And so I know that when I look over here, I've got some figures and some caption boxes, figure titles. So I don't really need like a big text box. I'm going to just maybe I'm going to get rid of these because I can always duplicate. This caption one I didn't use yet. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to group some of these. And I notice that there's a little tiny extra text box there. So I don't know. Maybe I'll group this whole thing.
Hey, Tammy, here's another little trick for grabbing a selection of items that are all in one section. And that is I start my selection. I click like sort of off of the margin. So basically, let me see if I can use my little annotator to explain what I'm talking about. Yes, get my little square. Yeah, I start right where your cursor is. But actually, I'll come in a little bit lower, so that way I'm not gonna. You can actually be quite sloppy in PowerPoint because you actually have to get around the entire object that you want. You can't just have like partially touching it. So yeah, basically I'll just click and drag out my selection generously around everything that I want to actually capture on that. And the fact that I didn't go beyond this left-hand edge of this white box means that I actually shouldn't capture that white box with it. But I like to do it that way just because I just want to avoid having to sort of tediously account for all the various elements and clicking onto them. Yeah. So if
I
you
wonder
drag,
if we'll pick up this though.
no, it shouldn't, because you will
Okay.
only get the edge of it. You
Okay.
have to literally get all the way around it. So yeah, there you go. And see how you didn't grab the box behind either, because you came in,
Go past it.
yeah, and you didn't quite go to the top of it. You know, you literally have to envelop the entire object that you want, and otherwise it just doesn't select.
Very cool. I do the quick and dirty drag a rectangle in Illustrator, but I haven't really done it here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so there again, I grouped. So we've got this like a lot of extra space. I'm going to move this out of my way.
Also, now that you sort of are organizing these elements, you know, your trusty old object select tool, or
Selection pane.
yeah, the selection pane, you can start depending on that a little bit more, especially some of these groups.
So we talked a little bit about sort of hierarchy of your text and how over here we had smaller headers and larger. I don't know what these are. Are these figure titles?
Yeah, panel titles.
Okay. So let's make those a lot smaller. Same with these. And then once you do this, you can obviously continue to play around. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Trying to figure out why this had all that extra space. That's why. Okay. Oh, my smart guides are kind of helping me here. So that's cool. None of this text is editable.
Yeah.
So we can't edit that. But we could. So here's where I would want to pull this over there. What do you think? To line up with that?
I mean,
or in the middle?
Yeah, I usually like sort of center align it with the data itself.
All right, we'll do that then.
But we could ask the audience what they do. Leave a comment on where you put yours.
I mean, people are always centering.
Yeah. I find like if you're centering the sort of axis labels and you're centering, you know, then it's also kind of hard because there's no clear indication of where the margin is always, because of the, you know, the y-axis label, you know, it could be double deep, it could be, you know, single line. So it just seems more consistent to align it either center or to the sort of to the left-hand side, you know, the sort of y-axis line.
Well, like over here.
Yeah.
And I'm holding down shift, but it's not constraining.
Oh yeah. It might be because it's in a group.
Oh, I am now. Never mind. I think I just, yeah. Okay. So what you're saying is we could sort of nudge it over to that, maybe even over there.
Yeah.
That y-axis label.
That's where it can always, there can be a lot of variability there. So it kind of makes more sense to align it to the center for me.
And then our template has some grayer, sort of a gray for the figure caption. Here we've got this. So this feels like a figure title to me. So we got to figure out
the caption.
if we want that. If we want that to match this, probably we do.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? 28. Okay. Whoops.
Oh, you know what though? Yeah, I guess you're interpreting that as the title of the figure.
Well, I don't know. It feels like a caption, right?
Yeah, I would say that's the caption, and similar, or the The title is more what your panel title is. So sorry, you're moving around, so I'm trying to scribble on it. These would be your panel titles, which would be the same as your, say, figure title in that other example. And then these would follow the caption style. That's what I would, that's how I'm interpreting.
Yeah, yeah. So to make it consistent.
Yeah.
So we would put like figure 1 or figure 3 up here, right?
Yeah.
Let's just check. Okay. Figure 3. Figure. Oh, this is 3 and 4.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's make this figure 4. And then just treat these with that gray. Whoops.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, you could do whatever makes the most sense, but you just want to be consistent across your poster.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. Okay. So this is
consistent and also applying the right hierarchy.
Right.
And the point of the captions being in a gray is that they could probably be of the same of the weight and scale as your body text, but the fact that you're graying them out means that you're just pushing them back in the hierarchy of the page, de-emphasizing them a bit, so that way their position in the hierarchy of the page is more clearly defined.
And then we might want to play around with
then you can adjust
that a little bit.
Yeah, you want to adjust they call that the rag, right? The how each line is breaking and the sort of shape that it's creating. Yeah, you always want to be conscientious of how that's sitting. You're leaving any behind.
And I just had a thought too. We talked about that hierarchy, but we didn't really touch any of this. I know we weren't going to do much with figures, but maybe we could scale down this text a little bit, right?
Yeah, for sure. Make that consistent.
Yeah. So let's make this like, I don't know. I always want to left align text.
Yeah, especially when all of your objects are to the left, then you align the text to the object and you are more directly labeling that element.
Not sure what happened there. Okay. I can't resist. I just want to move these arrows just over here like that, right?
Yeah.
And then, these things, we could use our align tools to kind of make these just quick and dirty, right? Align those. Okay. And we don't have to think about those much anymore. Okay. So back to our other poster. And then we just have this quadrant down below.
Yeah.
Conclusions, acknowledgements, future. Okay. So we don't need this. So we've just got these. And we have a decision to make, right? Because one of the things we didn't like about this other one was that they weren't equal.
Or that they were, I mean, not just not equal, but it seemed arbitrary as to why they were unequal. Right. It seems like they could have, it seems like there was, that was in order to squeeze in. That copy is very tight in the references section, but we could probably get away with doing a little trading for space and or size.
All right, so this was conclusions. Let's just see. Let's just get it set up first.
Now you've kind of fallen off the grid because you decided to make that center column a little jump the gutter of the grid. So now you're gonna have to split the difference when you create two equal sized ones, or you're just, you know what I mean? Either that or you make that column narrower.
I do know what you mean. But what if part of me wants to make it, make those align with this quadrant that we've built here. What do you think about that?
It's an option. I don't,
You
I
know,
feel like, so I do feel like there's not a need to do that. And meaning that like, um, figure sections basically have to, you're just not going to be able to always make the data constrained to your design needs. You know what I mean? You really have to like basically you get this is an open free space inside of the
this here.
yeah, of the figure space or that allotted space for the figure. Like this section is like a free form, make it fit as best as possible, but that's an isolated case. And it doesn't need to reflect the rest of the design. As long as that's sort of consistent and proportionate, basically what all happens in there sort of stays in there and is kept
All right. So then, yeah,
sort of the
then
Vegas of most, posters. What happens in there stays.
so then we got a little bit of work to sort of uh, figure out what our gutter is here, right?
Yeah.
So I've got these lined up, right?
See,
And
this is the
then,
part. This is the part where I'm like, I don't know, was that worth it? Making that center column, if you could make that center column a little bit narrower, um, would that then you would have to do less calculation because I think the other thing is going to run into is you're going to have to either measure and or decide if those other columns are going to be the same width.
so you're saying go one,
Yeah.
can we go one square down?
Yeah. Can you? That's the question.
Let's see.
Because this is where the beauty of the grid is. You just don't have to. Those calculations were already made, and this is the way that you or another approach might be uh do your initial layout, follow the grid, all the proportions are set, at that point, because you are relying on the git grid to be able to establish those good proportions, and then you can scale things down. Oh, I see. Now it's hitting sort of 3.5 columns. Yeah, this is a tricky one.
Hmm. I just want one.
To establish it.
Here's what I would do. I would get it aligned there. And then I would see what the width of these is and just make them each a little bit less until I got that space I wanted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? Because, or yeah, that's probably what I would do in this case. But that's not, look, that's a little tedious. Format, object. Like, and then I would probably just get it close enough.
Actually, pretty good.
Oh, why does it do that little jump? Well, we'll pretend that's perfect.
Mhm.
Unless you want me to keep going.
No, that's a keep moving.
All
Yeah,
right.
it's definitely the tedium of zooming in and out and making sure that you're sort of aligning those up, and and it is tedious, but putting in that effort, especially for establishing some of these early elements, is that you can align the rest of the boxes to them using the alignment tool.
All right. So these were our conclusions, and they did have bullets. Okay. And then this is future perspectives. And then so this is the only text box that's like formatted for a list for the references. I actually don't want that one. So I'm just going to duplicate this. What was your shortcut again? Let's do it.
Yeah, option, click and drag option, and then you'll hold down shift 2 and that'll constrain.
Yeah, shift option. There it is. All right. Quickly copy this. We could play around with the spacing of those bullets, but I'm going to nudge these up there. And will this let me? Oh, yeah. See, look at that. Even though there's no guide or grid for that, we can snap it to that. All right, we're almost there. Oh, no. I'm going to copy this. How do you feel about acknowledgements text being the same size, smaller, bigger? Sometimes I see it smaller. What do you think?
I mean, I don't see any point. I mean, it's a section just the same as any other one, even though it's thought of as maybe less important. But I would say, you just don't. There's no need to introduce more complexity to things, and keeping things consistent. Again, is sort of like the design is not meant to be. Design anomalies like that just draw attention to themselves rather than just having consistency. People can scan through things and understand, these are all like items. These are all header elements. Making one header slightly smaller just, I think, slows that the processing of information down. So I don't see the need.
But in this case, we have a lot, so we might have to.
Right. So this is where I think you adjust the formatting. So I think this section, you're talking about the body copy size, or you're talking about the header?
The body copy.
Oh, the body. Yeah. So that, yeah, I think that is I mean, not ideal, but yeah, that is a solution. If you're really crunched for space, and like, for example, the acknowledgements above that, I think we could probably adjust it so there's less line space in between each section.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
So if you go to format paragraph, then we can sort of make this. So right now it's set to single space. Oddly, to get less than single space, you have to go to multiple, right? And then just make it like less than one.
Exactly.
Might want to do that again.
And what is going on here? Because, I think there are paragraph spaces. Can you zoom into that actually?
Sure.
Because what I think is going on is that there are spaces in between like a return in between each one. Do you think so? Select all now. Yeah, exactly.
Ah.
That's what was tripping things up. So yeah.
Oh,
Now when
so
you
all right, let's go back. Right? Make that
yeah,
single.
yeah, much better.
And then I even see some formatting here, right? Bolding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's no good. That looks like an extra space there. I'm using align tools to kind of get that up here. And then we just have to figure out what to do here.
Yeah. You're sucking up all those extra spaces. It's going to buy you a lot more. Okay, but then
It's still a little long, right?
it is. Yeah. And you could go up. Like you've got some, but not enough. You don't have enough, but not by a long shot. So this is where I would start debating on, okay, how much can that figure above me go up?
I think these both can go up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Just like that all the way there. Yeah. And so yeah, that's where I would start debating on could that figure is quite large. Um
This one here.
yeah, and also, there seems to be a little bit of space there above those figure titles. Yeah, exactly. And you could probably bring those titles down slightly or yeah. So you just show it. This is where you
Ooh,
start figuring out where can I make up a little room? Right?
can you
Send
see
that
what?
piece back. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's covering.
All right. Ooh, look at this.
Uh-huh.
What is that? It's inside this group. Oh, there it is. Same with this. Oh, this. All right. That's some crazy grouping.
Mhm.
All right. All right. And then we're going to nudge all this up. I'm just shift. Oh, nope. I'm going to do this. Right.
Oh, you got to get all the way around them. Oh.
Oh, no. I left you behind.
Impersonal.
All right. And then we do want that little bit of margin. So, and we,
Yeah. So I think you're very close there, and I think if I would check the point size of that, and references are if you wanted to drop that down further.
there we go.
Yeah. Boom. There. Yeah.
All right. Anything else we want to
Mhm.
play around
Yeah.
with here? Oh, I just see something. Our groups here. Oh, no, never mind. It just looked a little different zoomed out. Okay. So if we look at let's look at our before and after next to each other. I got to move some zoom things out of the way. Okay.
Yeah. So you can appreciate too, like how those header bars are in both designs, but you can see really how they do accomplish a lot. They really do signify the space of the figure area below in each one, and they sort of define. So I'm marking it here so that we can both appreciate it, but you really don't need the background element for it.
Right.
It's not really dependent on that. Those header sections are really establishing that for you.
Yeah. And that's one of those things where our brain does that for us. It doesn't need to be that explicit.
And
I'm a little,
I'm
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say like some of the associations with it. So I might like, now that you have all your copy in there and you're looking at the nature of your figures, I might look at how closely they are associated with those header bars and sort of more visually or optically align those to those elements. So maybe push them up a little bit closer. So like for example, in a situation here where you've got trying to grab my pencil tool. Where you have the captions coming really close to this next header section, and maybe you get a little more generous space above, or similar kind of thing here where you've got this trailing space of this previous element, and then the space after the next header is probably a little bit more generous. You could probably tighten those things more up so that way things are more aligned to that header thing, and that would again sort of help to reinforce that. But that really is something that you do at this point. You sort of have all this stuff organized, then you can kind of sit back and say, okay, where are things, where can I tighten up those elements?
And if this were that single graphic instead of a group, we wouldn't have that weird boundary around it that makes you have to kind of do that optically.
Yeah, right. At some point, you can always break that up. You can hit your. Strangely enough, it's a very complicated shortcut, which is Command Option Shift G to break something up. It's an extra finger in there, but otherwise you go to I think Edit Ungroup.
And what do you think about this little white space here?
It doesn't bother me so much, but I think that that's if I don't know, if you look at and you see all of your text formatting is consistent, I kind of feel like there's probably more space between those bullets. I don't know why oh, maybe I'm not right on that.
Let's see, format.
Yeah, I was comparing it to the one above, and actually I think that's accurate. But what I would do actually is that the rag on these bullets is really inconsistent. So basically the first two bullets are very short, and then the subsequent two bullets are quite, span the almost the entire line length of that. And I actually would probably suck up that text box from the right, and I'd push it over to force the line break. So that way like I said, the sort of rag down here, actually, the rag would kind of follow a little bit more closely to that. Maybe I might push it over, around here. So that way these, first of all, you don't get this little runt on the end here. There's just one word hanging here. That's, a little bit more balanced of a line. But yeah, I would push this to a second line. So that way the text box here would just be a little bit more rectangular rather than this sort of panhandle that's coming out. That might improve the shape and adjust the length of that too. That's going to also help you with this weird little white space.
White space doesn't bother me, but in my experience, it does seem to bother a lot. Like people really want things to fill all the space. And I know sometimes some journals will say, minimize excessive white space. And so I think that's gotten into some people's heads. But I don't think it's a bad thing. Yeah. I did notice.
In my mind, actually, this is more offensive white space than this one. Because you basically it's an unpleasing sort of shape and break of it. If this was more consistent and these if you had a white space that more ran, like this, that it just seems like a better and the black space or the dark space, the content of it is more balanced on that. And that's really what matters more to me.
I just noticed that this is 28, but this is 22. And so
that's interesting.
I think that's because I think I duplicated
the previous one here.
A box that was, I think maybe our template is set to have conclusions No,
Oh, like this
acknowledgements be smaller. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there
So,
you go. That's also a good reminder to go back and double check your formatting and make sure that you are consistent there. So I think that's a good you can kind of catch some of these things.
so I did both, right? This got bigger, but then we also dragged this in
Yeah.
just to make those a little bit more consistent.
Yeah.
And we're still just barely within that margin.
So at this point, like say you've got all these things and they're lining up good, and again, actually look at this. I don't think this horizontal line needs to line up. I think it's more important that you're judging these things by their columns than you are by their columns and rows. This doesn't need to be a perfect little grid down here. They just have to be consistent columns. So these being, shifted off alignment there, I think that's perfect. If this one is dropping down below the bottom of this margin, again, you're not at a deal breaker. You've just been using that grid as a great tool for establishing, the proportion of the overall thing. Now, here's a little trick that you can do now that you're at your end of the, at the sort of the last and final stage, is that if you need, if this is running just a little too tight to the bottom, you can now grab the entire composition, including even the header content, and just shrink that down. Like, what is that? Like not even a percent, you know what I mean? And then you would just basically just select everything and reduce down. I would do it proportionally, but you could even get away with just a tiny bit of just vertical shrinking, you know what I mean? And it would be imperceptible, and you would just kind of be able to pull up that bottom area.
Two things. One, that makes me nervous, but I'll do it.
Yeah.
And two, I would sit here and nudge things for another like 8 hours.
I would too. Yes, that is, of course, the more inattentive thing that you and I would go to that extent, for sure.
So for you to say like, oh, you've got it where you want it, I would say no. I've got 4 more hours. No, not 4, but I've got more time to just kind of like nudge around a little bit, but pretending that that's what we want. So I'm going to use your technique of doing that. Would you group it before you did that or no?
Yes, you have to. You have to in PowerPoint, because if you go to actually just grab a corner at this point, it will shrink all those boxes individually. So yeah, you have to group all those elements, and then.
And look what's happening. I've got to ungroup those other groups.
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Oh, you know why? Is because some of that is placeholder elements, and you cannot group placeholder elements in with your I don't know what you call it, like freeform content elements. The ones that you might, a text box that you would randomly add, or an image that you would randomly add. Yeah.
Right. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, that is such a weird thing, and I don't know how to change that, or how to like.
Right, because all of these originated as a placeholder, right? Because it's a template and it's formatted. So that's why we can group these things, right?
Yeah.
Or these things. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if you can disassociate that with its placeholder. I'll have to look into that. If anybody knows, or knows the problem that I'm describing and the rationale for it.
Let me just. I mean, we're one line past. That margin.
I mean, I wouldn't sweat it that hard.
No, I wouldn't either.
I would do. That's not. I'm not gonna lie. I would do something about it, but I would tell somebody else, don't sweat it that hard.
Right. Yeah. So what I would do at the end is I would just like grab, these things and just make sure they're all aligned. Yeah. Right. Yeah. These two, these two. I would just try to like as a last check, because it's so easy for things to get nudged.
For sure.
That's what I would do. Then I would go in and turn that grid off. I might even, Make sure these are aligned left. Same with those two.
Yeah.
I might even nudge these down just a bit. That's what I was doing. Spend my next 8 hours doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't really talk about this, but I would also check my capitalization in my figure here against, you know, am I doing title case? Am I doing sentence case? I've got a mix, right? I've got media, lowercase, and then amino acid stock, all capitalized. So I would make those consistent.
For sure.
Same with our figure titles, right? Model and approach.
Yeah, all consistent. Choose one style and go.
Right. I'm going to quickly just go turn that grid off. I go into the slide master. I go up here. I could delete it.
Good do.
Cooler thing to do is just to turn it off.
Yeah.
View normal, go back to your slide. You'll see it's gone. And then I would, let's see. Oh, save as PDF. And I talked about this earlier where sometimes people will print to a PDF. I was always told you should never do that. You should always save as PDF. And then I know on Windows, sometimes you'll get options for interactive versus for print. And the Mac, we don't see that. But if you, excuse me, if you have that, I would definitely choose for print.
Absolutely. Especially because it'll be optimizing. The main thing for that, and I would just say, especially with all these placed images, there is a concern for color management in your placed images, and if there are color profiles associated with those images, you want them to be carried over to your final print. So that way, there's the colors that are intended or that you're sort of seeing in the digital version on your monitor in particular are going to look very close to, if not the same as the printed one. So that print option is going to prioritize the color management of your images, and that's why that's kind of key. The other one is the interactive one is going to be screen oriented, and it's going to be not taking that into consideration for color printing, and it's going to be more set for sort of web standards.
And I forgot, this was our little stand-in for our team photo.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know why that's happening?
No, because there's no image in there.
I know. And it's not a text box, is it?
Yeah. Oh, is it because it has to scale proportionally? Try scaling it from a corner. Oh, look at that. It must be that high. No.
Oh, yeah, weird. Now, anyway, I just didn't want to forget that's our team photo in there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's our poster.
Yeah.
I feel like we spent the most time on PowerPoint, yet we really wanted to advocate for using Illustrator, interestingly.
I know, right?
But yeah.
I think this might help out a few more people.
This is the tool most people are using, but like we said, Illustrator, you can get into the weeds, a little more fine tuning. PowerPoint is more ubiquitous. So we have templates for both.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.